In the early hours of the morning, the police department received 2 alarm calls. When the officers arrived at the address, they saw a shocking picture, but it turned out to be more difficult to understand what had happened than everyone thought. It took 13 years to find the truth until this dark secret was finally solved. Heidi Erickson was born on December 14, 1984 in the small American town of Hulk, Minnesota. She grew up in a large and close-knit family. The girl had loving parents and 2 brothers. From early childhood, Heidi had a great desire to learn and was quite an active child. She loved to draw postcards for her friends, played basketball and tennis, and sang in the choir. In high school, the girl joined the youth group of the church community. There she met a guy named Nick, who was 2 years older than the girl and lived in the same neighborhood as her. The couple soon started dating, and 2 years later they were married. According to their acquaintances, Heidi and Nick's marriage was almost perfect. They did not clash, often traveled together, went to church, and lived exemplary lives. They also made ambitious plans for the future. Heidi got a job at the financial firm where her father worked, and Nick became the director of a local carpet cleaning company. In addition, they led various youth groups in their church. 2 years after the wedding, the couple moved into a new home located in St. Paul. It was located in a fairly safe and peaceful place, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. It seemed that the couple had a happy and carefree future ahead of them. However, on April 25, 2010, everything changed. At 6 o'clock, the emergency services received a call from their home. Heidi said someone was trying to break into their house. She was visibly frightened and gave the operator the address, after which there was a loud bang, a woman's scream, and the call was cut off. The operator dispatched the police to the address and tried to call her back, but no one answered. A minute later, the emergency team received another call from the number, this time from Nick. The man screamed and cried, begging for police and an ambulance. He told the operator that someone had broken into their house. Hearing the noise, Nick told his wife to call the police, and he took a shotgun and went down to the first floor, where he came across an unknown man in a hood. A struggle ensued between them, as a result of which the shotgun fired twice. The bullets hit the man in the leg and in Heidi's back. The police quickly arrived at their home, where they found an injured Nick and his wife, who was already dead. The man was taken to the hospital, where he received the necessary assistance. The wound was penetrating, but not life-threatening. In the meantime, investigators have begun to examine the crime scene. The first thing they noticed was that there were no signs of a break-in in the house, and the lock on the front door was completely intact. This could mean that the perpetrator once had access to the house or had duplicate keys. The police also did not rule out that Heidi simply forgot to lock the front door before going to bed, and the criminal easily entered their house on the first floor. Investigators saw traces of a struggle, a lot of blood, and Nick's shotgun, but they couldn't find any solid leads. At the same time, the police began to search nearby areas and neighborhoods. They conceded that the killer might still be somewhere in the vicinity and hoped to locate him. Detectives also used search dogs, but they were unable to trace the culprit. Investigators interviewed neighbors who shared several observations. One of them said that sometime between 6:15 and 6:20 a.m., he heard a car speeding down their street from the direction of Heidi's house. He said the car was driving at a very high speed, but could not remember any distinctive features. Another neighbor told police that he heard a high-pitched male scream at around 6 o'clock. His story was corroborated by several other neighbors, and investigators concluded that it was Nick's scream. Investigators noticed one strange thing. Heidi called emergency services at 6:30 a.m. Neighbors had heard her husband screaming about 10 minutes earlier. At the same time, based on the data available to the detectives, the killer should have spent only a few minutes in the house and fled immediately after the shots were fired. With no clues in hand, the police went to the hospital to see Nick to get more details about what had happened. The man said that he woke up at about 6 o'clock and went down to the first floor to drink water. As he walked past the front door, he heard a noise and found a man trying to sneak in. Nick immediately ran upstairs, woke his wife up, and told her about it. He told her to call 911, picked up his shotgun, and decided it would be best for them to go down to the first floor and leave the house through the back door. But as soon as they were downstairs, the intruder entered the house and pounced on Nick, trying to take the weapon away from him. In the course of the struggle, the shotgun went off, and the bullet hit Heidi in the back. After she fell, a second shot was fired, this time in Nick's leg. After that, the perpetrator ran away from home, and Nick got to the phone and called the police. According to him, the attacker was a man who was between 182 and 189 centimeters tall and weighed up to 100 kilograms. The perpetrator was wearing a black hooded sweatshirt pulled over his head, which made his face almost invisible. As a result, he was unable to see any other features of the attacker, which made the task of the police very difficult. Detectives considered several versions. The first option was a robbery that didn't go according to plan. Nick and Heidi were well off and had a lot of valuables in their house. The second version is a targeted murder. This was doubtful, as investigators were unable to find any hint that anyone could have wished the couple dead. Of course, they also considered Nick's involvement, as is usually the case in such cases. However, there were a few nuances here. First, Heidi herself called 911, and according to her husband's account, they were in contact with an operator when the perpetrator entered their home. Secondly, all of Heidi's relatives and friends said that the couple had no serious problems. They were happy, had recently returned from vacation, and in general, the woman had never complained about her husband's aggressive behavior. Detectives decided to take a closer look at their life together, and soon discovered something interesting. And it turned out that the couple had quite serious financial problems. To the surprise of investigators, Heidi and Nick were supposed to move out of their home the day after the incident. To buy this house in 2005, they took out 2 loans and paid them off until 2008. However, the payments have since stopped coming in, and eventually the bank made the decision to take their home. Nick contacted a law firm that helped delay this. However, the house was eventually auctioned off, and the couple had to move out. On April 26, 2010, the police spoke to Nick again, and the man admitted that he and his wife were experiencing financial difficulties. The couple planned to move out, but they could not decide where to settle until the very end. They were also reluctant to tell their relatives because they were ashamed of being evicted from their home. At the same time, investigators drew attention to the fact that Heidi and Nick spent quite a lot of money until the very end. They bought expensive things, went on vacation, and generally lived as if they didn't have any money problems. Heidi's friends and relatives were surprised by the news. The woman never mentioned their debts, except on one occasion. A few months before her death, she saw letters with information about debts. But then Nick said that it must be some kind of mistake, and he would sort out the situation. Heidi's mother wasn't aware of what was going on either. She told the police that her daughter would definitely share such serious problems with her, but she never brought up the topic. Then the detectives wondered if the woman was aware of all these problems. They found out that Nick was in charge of the family budget, and he may well have kept it a secret. This was indirectly indicated by the fact that the couple did not even begin to pack their things. They had to leave the house the next day. However, all the things in the house were in their places, and there was nothing to indicate that the move was imminent. Given the amount of stuff Nick and Heidi had, one day to get ready would not have been physically enough. The police also found out that Nick owed banks about $20,000 on other loans, and payments on those obligations were also overdue. Investigators wondered if Nick might be in debt to someone else. It is possible that the man borrowed money from someone who decided to take the debt by force, and this led to Heidi's death. Nick denied this version, and insisted that his wife was aware of the money problem and they tried to solve it together. A few days after the murder, when the police completed the investigation at the crime scene, the house was handed over to the bank, and in June 2010 it was sold by the new owner. Investigators continued to dig into the case, but they were unable to find any clues. They continued to summon Nick for interrogations, and he cooperated extensively. The man even provided them with his DNA sample, but eventually got fed up with being treated as a suspect. He hired a lawyer who advised him to stop communicating with the police. The lawyer insisted that Nick was the victim who witnessed the murder of his wife, and accused investigators of not wanting to look for the real perpetrator. He hired a private artist who made a sketch of the suspect based on Nick's words. The police found it strange that this time the man remembered much more details about the killer's appearance. Although during the first interrogation, he said that he could not even see the color of his skin. Now, a few weeks after the crime, he remembered not only that, but also some facial features, as well as the alleged age of the perpetrator. Despite this, they accepted the sketch, made leaflets, and pasted them around the city. The police received several calls in which people shared information about the alleged killer. However, none of them led to the trail of the criminal. As a result, the investigators reached an impasse. They tried to start the investigation from scratch, but it didn't lead to any new discoveries. The police still did not rule out the possible involvement of the husband, but also considered other versions. In the months that followed, there was no progress. 2 years later, Nick remarried to a woman named Rachel Watson. They had known each other before the incident and later reunited with the traumas of the past. Rachel divorced her previous husband, who regularly raised his hand against her, and Nick tried to cope with the loss of his wife. Over time, the couple had 3 children and moved into a new home. Nick had to ask his parents to take out a loan for them, as his previous debts made it almost impossible to get approval. Despite this, he paid regularly, and the family did not have any financial problems. That is, until Rachel found letters saying they might soon be evicted from their home for not paying their house tax. Based on the information in the letters, Nick never paid it. As a result, the house was being prepared to be sold at auction. The woman demanded an explanation from her husband, but he said that it must be some kind of mistake, and he would try to deal with it. However, Rachel was reluctant to take his word for it. She'd noticed before that Nick liked to spend money on expensive, unnecessary things. She repeatedly found some new items in the house, but the man said that he did not buy them. Rachel then remembered that Nick and Heidi had also had serious financial difficulties before her murder, and the woman began to become seriously worried. As a result, she decided to move out of her husband with her children, after which she filed for divorce. A year later, the Heidi murder case was re-examined, and a new detective, Nicole Sykes, was appointed. She researched all the available information and decided to focus on recording Heidi's phone conversation with the 911 operator. The woman wanted to understand whether it was possible to determine the presence of a third person in the house from this audio track. Nicole turned to the FBI for help, and experts examined the recording in detail. They dismantled the audio track and could not find a single sign that someone else was in the house at the time of the call. According to Nick, the perpetrator tried to take the shotgun away from him, and there was a struggle between the two. However, no signs of a scuffle were found on the recording. Nicole also reviewed the recordings of her colleagues' conversations with Nick, where she noticed another oddity. According to the man, that morning he woke up his wife, took a shotgun, and they went downstairs to leave the house through another door. But Nick added that he let Heidi go ahead of him up the stairs to the first floor. The detective thought it strange. Why didn't the man with the gun go forward, knowing that a criminal was trying to get into the house? In addition, Nicole asked the FBI to create a digital scene of what happened, based on the available evidence and Nick's words. And here again she saw a very suspicious moment. Her husband said that the gun went off during the fight against the criminal, but the wound on Heidi's back indicated otherwise. The bullet entered the chest area at an angle from above. This means that at the time of firing, the gun was about the height of her head. But Nick claimed that during his fight with the criminal, he held the weapon at waist level. The detective also learned that Nick's ex-wife Rachel also suspected him of murder, after she discovered that her husband hadn't paid his taxes and lied about it. She began to wonder what else he might be hiding. The woman even asked him almost directly if he had killed his wife and recorded the conversation, but the man denied everything. It all seemed suspicious. However, Nicole couldn't understand Nick's motives. Apparently, their marriage was indeed a happy one, and after Heidi's death, the man did not even receive any insurance payments. There was only one option left. It was not the money that mattered to him, but the maintenance of his own lies at all costs. The detective admitted that Nick, who constantly spent impressive sums of money, was afraid that his wife would find out about their financial problems and that he had been lying to her for several years. In the end, he could have made a decision that would have rid him of that shame, killing Heidi. Putting it all together, Nicole decided that the information she had was enough to take the case to court. In May 2021, Nick was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. A trial began in January 2023. The prosecution claimed that Nick made the decision to kill his wife because of financial problems. He couldn't admit to her that they had lost their home and gone into huge debt because of his lies. The crime scene, as well as the 9.11 entry, did not show any signs of the presence of a bystander. The bullet entered the victim's back as if the weapon was pointed at him from above, which contradicted Nick's version. The prosecutor also pointed out that there were no signs of a break-in at the front door. There was some damage left next to the lock, as if someone had really tried to break it. However, experts argued that this would not be enough to open the lock. The defense adhered to the version of an unknown criminal who entered the house. There was no new evidence to support this story, and ultimately the jury found Nick guilty of murder. A man was sentenced to life in prison without the right to early release. In his final statement, he said he continued to insist on his innocence. His close relatives also said they could not believe Nick's guilt and would continue to believe everything. Nevertheless, the sentence entered into force, and it was not possible to appeal it.